In a previous video, I configured the switches and routers in this topology with IP addresses, as well as enabling the various ports. Let's have a look at CDP, or Cisco Discovery Protocol, and LLDP, or Link Layer Discovery Protocol, and see if we can discover the links between the devices. So I'll start with switch 1. Here's switch 1. Type enable, show CDP neighbor. In the output, we can see switch 2, switch 3, and switch 4. Switch 2 is connected on 2 ports, gigabit 00, this local interface, as well as gigabit 01, this local interface. Switch 2 is using gigabit 00 to connect to our local interface gigabit 00, and that's true in our GNS3 topology. Gigabit 00 on switch 2 is connected to gigabit 00 on switch 1, and the same is true for gigabit 01. Switch 3, this device over here, is connected to switch 1 on gigabit 02. So this local interface, gigabit 02, is the interface that switch 3 is connected to, and switch 3 is using gigabit 00, as you can see over here. And by the same token, switch 4, the switch over here in the GNS3 topology, is connected to switch 1 on gigabit 03, and it's using gigabit 01. So Cisco Discovery Protocol, or CDP, runs by default on Cisco switches and routers, and is a nice way to see how devices are connected in the topology. Notice, however, that you only see directly connected devices. So switch 1 over here doesn't see router 1 and doesn't see router 3. It only sees the directly connected switches that are running CDP. Let's have a look at switch 2. So, switch 2, show CDP neighbor. The command shows us the neighboring devices. We can see switch 3, router 3, switch 1, and switch 4. So notice that on switch 2, this switch, we can see router 3 being connected to gigabit 01 using fast Ethernet 00. We can also see that it's a 3725 router, and we can see capabilities of that device. In other words, it's a router, it can act as a switch, and it supports IGMP, which is used in multicast environments. So switch 2 can see router 3, but switch 1 cannot, because Cisco Discovery Protocol only shows you directly connected neighbors, not devices connected behind a device running CDP. In other words, switch 1 can see switch 2 but cannot see router 3, where switch 2 is able to see router 3, but by the same token, switch 2 is not able to see router 2. To see router 2, we'd need to connect to switch 4. So here's switch 4. Show CDP neighbor. Notice switch 4 is able to see switch 2 up there. It's able to see switch 1 over there, and it's able to see router 2. It can also see that router 2 is using fast Ethernet 00. Switch 1 is using gigabit 02 to connect to switch 4, and switch 1 is using gigabit 03 to connect to switch 4. Lastly, let's have a look at switch 3. The switch 3 is over here in our topology. Show CDP neighbor. It can see router 1, it can see switch 1, as well as switch 2. So CDP is a very useful protocol, once again, to discover devices that are connected to your local router or switch. What about the routers? So on router 1, show CDP neighbor. Router 1 can only see switch 3 as being directly connected to fast Ethernet 00, so its local interface, and switch 3 is using gigabit 02 to connect to router 1. If you were connected to the console of one switch and you needed to discover your topology, what you could do as an example is type show CDP neighbors. So like on switch 1, I can see my neighbors. But then I can also do this option, show CDP neighbors detail. So show CDP neighbors detail shows that switch 3 is directly connected to switch 1. But now I can also see the IP address of that switch. So I could telnet from my local switch to that switch and then use CDP to see the neighbors connected to that device. Notice I can glean a lot of information about the neighboring device through CDP. So I can see that it's a Cisco device that supports routing and switching and IGMP. I can see my local interface and the outgoing port of the neighboring device. I can see the version of operating system running on that device, so version 15.2 as an example. I can see which version of CDP it's running, so it's running version 2. I can see its management IP address once again. See the native VLAN, see the duplex. So a lot of information can be shown through CDP about neighboring devices, and that's why for security reasons, companies turn off CDP typically on internet-facing interfaces or interfaces facing the outside world. So on router 3, as an example, show CDP neighbors shows me that there is a core 3750 switch connected out of FOST Ethernet 01. That is a physical Cisco switch running in my local home network. So you might not want your networking devices to advertise themselves through internet-connected interfaces, because now I can discover what IP address that device is using. I can see what type of device it is. So it's a 3750, but what I could do now is telnet to that device and try to access it. So I could log in now, and notice now I'm connected to this physical Cisco switch. So from a security point of view, you probably want to hide your devices, and therefore you want to disable CDP on internet-facing interfaces or interfaces that connect you to the outside world.